So now we get started with refs, reactive, and with functions which replace methods. What about computed properties? How can we replace those? Again, let's expand our example here a little bit. Let's say we actually don't just have the change age button, but we have a div below that, below the change age button, and in there we have two inputs. The first input here is for the first name. The second input is for the last name. And I want to use the values entered here to output my username, which should be combined from first and last name. Now let's see how we can implement this. First of all, I will add two refs here. I will add a first name ref, which initially is an empty string, and a last name ref, which also is empty initially. Of course, you could have different default values, but I will start with empty strings. Now I want to update the first name whenever we type into this input, and the last name whenever we type into this input. We'll have a look at two-way binding and vmodel in a second. For the moment, I'll do it manually by listening to @input. So by listening to the input event. Now I want to trigger some code whenever this event occurs, and therefore I'll actually add a new function, set first name, where I get the default event object, and where I then want to set firstName.value, so the value of the first name ref, equal to event target value. And do the same for the last name, set last name, getting the event, and setting lastName.value equal to event target value. Now we can expose these two functions through this object to the template. Set first name points at set first name. And here I use the same name for the key as I do for the variable that holds the function. And hence we can use the modern JavaScript shorthand to just use this name once. And this will automatically be expanded to this longer syntax by JavaScript. This simply saves us some code which we don't have to type. And the same for set last name. So now these functions, set first name and set last name, are exposed under these identifiers to the template. So we can bind them. Here on the first input, I'll point at set first name. On the second one, I'll point at set last name. And calling these functions works just as you learned it. You can call them manually, you can forward the event object manually then, or you just point at them and let Vue execute those functions for you, passing on the default event object for you when these events occur. So regarding event listening and how you call functions, nothing changed. But now we got these two inputs in place, and we're updating first name and last name with every keystroke. Now I don't really need uname anymore. Instead, now I want to have a computed username which is based on the first and the last name, and which therefore should update whenever first and last name changes. Now, as you might guess, we're not going to do this by adding the computed option. This is as we would have done it in the past, but this is not how we'll do it anymore. Instead, again, we'll write more code here in the setup method. But which code? Well, there is another function we can import from the Vue framework, and that is the computed function. And it already gives us a clear hint at what it will do. You call computed in your setup function, and then computed wants a function as an argument. It's the function that holds your computed logic. So basically what you had in a computed property before as well. Computed properties with the options API were methods where you returned the computed value. And we're doing the same here in this function, which we pass to the computed call. Here we return our computed value. So for example, first name plus a blank plus last name. And not this first name, because we're not referring to a property. I'm just referring to this first name ref here and to this last name ref? Well, and actually, since I'm referring to refs, we should use .value because you learned a ref is an object with a value property, and the actual value which is managed is stored in that value property. Which is also why we're setting the value property here in setFirst and setLastName. You're only allowed to omit the value property if you use this ref in the template. If you use it anywhere in JavaScript code and you want to read or write to the value, then you have to access .value. But with that, we return this value as a computed property, and this computed function simply makes sure that this function we pass to it is re-executed whenever one of the dependencies, so in this case, whenever first name or last name changes. And the view will automatically dive into this function and keep track of all the dependencies specified there. It will see that you're using first name and last name here, and therefore it will automatically keep track of those refs and update the computed property whenever one of the two refs changes. Now, of course, computing a value is nice, but only useful if we save it somewhere. So here I'll have my uname. I commented out the old uname, so now I have my new uname, which is a computed property. And a computed property under the hood is also just a ref. So on uname you can access a value, but, and that's important, but it is a ref which is read-only. Normal refs, like first name and last name and age, are read and write. We can set new values as we're doing it in various places. Computed properties, computed refs, are read-only. Setting value, like I'm doing it here, is not something you should do, is not something that's allowed. Reading is okay though. And with that, we return our username still pointing at uname, which now is this new computed ref. And with that, username should be output here, and it should be updated whenever we type into those inputs. So if we save this, you initially see no name up there, but if I start typing, you see that name getting longer and longer. And that is because we're using a computed property, a computed ref, which we expose to the template, which we update by updating our first and last name refs.